All right, key topic 2, licensing requirements. All right, Section 80 of the FCC regulations, giving us the 5 examples of when you do not need a license. 1, a shore radar, a shore radio location, maritime support, or shore radio navigation station. So basically something on the shore. And number 2, a survival craft station. So you're basically in a life raft and you're transmitting a signal. You do not need a license. I guess I don't have an FCC license, so I'm just going to float around here in the ocean. So it's okay. You don't need a license for that.
That'd be hilarious. Like after you got rescued, they find you for it.
Yeah, that's a good point. 3, a ship radar station if the radar frequency is determined by a non-tunable pulse-type magnetron or other fixed-tune device, which we'll talk about down the road. And the radar is capable of being operated exclusively by external controls. So basically the knobs on the outside of the radar unit, where you don't have to actually get inside and do something. You don't really need a special license to operate the radar station if it's that type. 4, an onboard station, or 5, a ship station operated in the VHF band on board a ship voluntarily equipped with radio and sailing on a domestic voyage. So that's an exception, and VHF is the band that most of the pleasure boaters are going to use, in addition to, commercial, but they use other bands as well. All right, so the first question, which commercial radio operator license is required to operate a fixed-tuned radar station, ship radar station, with external controls? A radio operator certificate containing a ship radar endorsement. B, a marine radio operator permit or higher. That was our element 1. And actually A would have been element 3 with radar element 8 endorsement attached. C, either a first or second class radio telegraph certificate, or the GROL, the General Radio Telephone Operator License, element 3. And I'm not exactly sure, element 4 or 5, something like that for the other ones. Or D, no radio operator authorization is required.
I'm going to say D on that one.
Yes, it was part of our list that we saw. It was the ship radar station, and it did meet the extra requirement of no external controls on the top. So D is the correct answer. So they are talking about radar being automated so that there's no technical adjustments needed from other than the outside controls. And we are talking about the pleasure vehicle also. All right. Another regulation that has to do with the Great Lakes Radio Agreement. That's kind of the area that I'm from, the Great Lakes area. I'm between Lake Huron and Lake Michigan. Each ship subject to the Great Lakes Radio Agreement must have on board an officer or member of the crew who holds a marine radio operator permit or higher class license. So that was our element 1, which is what we're studying right here. Our 24 questions in order to get our element 1 license. So that will be good if you're actually subject to the Great Lakes Radio Agreement. Okay, so let's see what the question is. What is the minimum radio operator requirements for ships subject to the Great Lakes Radio Agreement? Is it A, the third-class radio telephone telegraph operator certificate? I wonder if I should just throw the poll up. Option B, the Element 3 general radio operator telephone or operator license. C, Element 1 marine radio operator permit. Or D, the restricted radio telephone operator permit, which is one of those numbers that I don't have memorized. All right, I see we got a C, and I agree with you, C. A short regulation, and we already read it. This one here is section 13.9. Now this, we're getting into getting a license. So these are the basic requirements for licensing. If found qualified, the following persons are eligible to apply for a commercial radio operator license. 1. Any person legally eligible for employment in the United States. Well, that's pretty good. I think that's going to cover at least both of us. 2. Any person for the purpose of operating aircraft radio stations who holds, in effect, a pilot certificate. Or 3. Any person who holds an FCC radio station license. So basically, I would almost say anybody. But it's not quite anybody, but it's close to it. 4. Notwithstanding any other provisions of the FCC rules, no person shall be eligible to be issued a commercial radio operator license when, and then there's 3 reasons when you cannot get a license. The first 2 have to do with suspension. You've got a license that's been suspended, or 2, it's subject to an ongoing suspension proceeding, or 3, if you're afflicted with complete deafness or complete muteness or complete inability for any other reason to transmit correctly and receive correctly by telephone spoken messages in English. Which I suppose just because of the nature of a radio license, it requires ability to hear and speak.
Yeah, I feel like if I'm radioing to someone to say, hey, watch out for that iceberg over there, and they can't hear it.
Yeah, sign language isn't going to work on the radio. All right, so here's the question. Which of the following persons are ineligible to be issued a commercial radio operator license? A. Individuals who are unable to send and receive correctly by telephone spoken Englishes in English. I don't know if we have to go much further, but take a quick look. Handicapped persons. That's a little too broad. C. Foreign maritime radio operators, unless they're certified by the IMO. Or D. U.S. military radio operators. Basically, the question is who is ineligible. And if I recall, it's if you're suspended or currently being suspended, or if you're got the complete muteness or deafness. So,
I'm gonna say it's A.
Okay. A is, yeah, I was a little late with the poll, but I agree with you. These are, setting it up this way does make it a little more easier to answer some of these questions. Not all of them, though.
Yeah.
All right. Operator's responsibility. And I've got some in smaller print that I'm not going to be as concerned about. Basically, you have to keep up an entry in the station maintenance records about what maintenance work you do, your name and address, the type of license you have. And apparently C, when the operator is on duty and in charge of transmitting systems, your license or permit document or photocopy must be posted or in the operator's personal possession and available for inspection upon request by an FCC representative. So you can kind of guess what the question's going to be. What is a requirement of every commercial operator on duty and in charge of a transmitting system? I'm gonna and you could probably read some of these yourself, but a copy of the proof of passing certificate. B, the original license or photocopy must be posted or in your personal possession and available for inspection. C, Form 605, certifying your qualifications. Or D, a copy of your license must be supplied to the supervisor. And we're saying it's B, basically having the original license or a photocopy posted or in your wallet and available for inspection.
Oh, hey, we got another one.
I just noticed that 2 of 2 are correct in the answer column. So, nice. All right, so let's go to the next one. All right, since we're talking about licenses, I did go over this a little bit with you last time, but basically there's going to be 4 that we're kind of concerned with. In the first one, I don't know if I've even seen one, but apparently you can get a restricted permit with no exam, I think basically just by applying for it. And that basically lets you do some limited things that we'll go over here in a second. The element 1, and you can see the examination elements, so it's element 1 is the MP, the MROP, the Marine Radio Operator Permit, and that's one where we take the element 1 exam, and it is good for your lifetime. And it's got the 24 questions. Let's take a look at it down here. Element 1. There are 24 questions. You have to get 18 of them at least correct. Since each one of the questions, they'll give us 6 examples, and they are published. So in effect, if you take 6 times 24, you're going to come up with 144 questions that we'll be covering. This is element 2. So last time we covered 6 questions of the 144. Right now we're on the 4th one today. So we're already into 10 questions. So you can tell we're going to fly through these pretty quickly. I'm dragging my feet a little bit just to try to get the explanations inside.
So that's what you were saying about, like, by the end of this month, I might even be able to take the element 1.
Yes, I think that if we cover 2, let's say 4 a week, I mean, you could do it actually quicker. You don't necessarily have to wait for me, but element 3 is the GROL, which stands for General Radio Telephone Operator's License. You do have to have your element 1, which is the reason we're taking it. And then you take the element 3 exam. That has 100 questions. You have to get 75 out of 100 correct. So therefore, if we're studying 100 questions and there's going to be 6 possibilities for each one, there's going to be a total of 600 questions. That's going to take the remainder of the semester and maybe a touch into No, let's just say the rest of the semester, and maybe a little extra. Element 8 is a ship radar endorsement. Uh, you have to already have the Element 3 because it is an endorsement on that license. I believe it's also an endorsement on some other licenses, but whatever license you're putting it on, you have to have that license before you can take, in this case, the Element 8 ship radar endorsement. That's a 50 question. You have to get 38 of them correct. The question pool is 300. Once we go through the 600, those 300 we can fly through. And that's when we talk about the magnetron and some other radar techniques. For this purpose, let's take a look at this restricted radio telephone operator's permit a little closer. No exam is required. Now, it used to be an RR and an RL. I think they combined them both into just one RP, a radio permit. It's issued without any examination. To qualify for that, you must meet all 4 of the following requirements. All right, be a legal resident or hold a radio license or hold an aircraft pilot certificate valid here. Be able to speak and hear. Be able to keep at least a rough written log and be familiar with provisions of applicable treaties, laws, and rules that govern the radio station you'll operate. You do not need it for certain things, and you'll see that aircraft is in the first one. So it's a voluntarily equipped ship or aircraft station, which only operates in the VHF frequencies and does not make foreign voyages or flights, which, down here, flying to the Bahamas is actually closer than flying to Tampa. So if you're going to be flying to the Bahamas, you probably do need this, what we call now an RP, a radio permit. An aeronautical ground or coast station that operates only in the VHF frequencies. And you probably already know that stands for very high frequency onboard stations. And it was also good for life. Here's an example of when you need the various licenses. The minimum operator license or permit required for operation of each of the specific classification is the minimum operator license or permit is going to be listed underneath. So RP, the radio permit, is the first 2. That's going to be land stations of all classes that use all frequencies, except for VHF, providing domestic service. So that's just a radio permit. Aircraft stations, all classes, those are the frequencies below 30 megahertz that are allocated exclusively to aeronautical mobile services. You just need a radio permit to fly to be a pilot and fly to the Bahamas. If you're going to be doing frequencies below 30 megahertz that are not exclusively allocated to aeronautical, then you do need the Element 1, the Marine Radio Operator Permit, or higher. And if you're going to be above 30 megahertz, especially if they're not allocated exclusively for aircraft and they're assigned for international use, you definitely need the MROP or the MP. Frequencies above 30 megahertz not assigned for international use, apparently you need no license. So let's see, that's a long way to get to this a little more complicated question. When is a Marine Radio Operator Permit or higher license required for aircraft communications? And you can see each one of the options does have the megahertz in there. come? I'm not relaunching. Oh, there it is. All right, so what are the options? A, so when do you need a MROP or an MP? When operating on frequencies below 30 megahertz, allocated exclusively for aeronautical mobile services? No, I believe that was just the RP. The RP. B, when operating on frequencies above 30 megahertz that are allocated exclusively to aeronautical mobile services? Now, I didn't see that one on there. I did see an above 30 megahertz, but that had more to do with the international designation. C, when operating on frequencies below 30 megahertz, not allocated exclusively to aeronautical mobile services. That one, I think we did step into the little higher ground that we actually needed it. Now, if we're just going to be under 30 megahertz and it's exclusively aircraft, we don't need it. We just need the MP. But if you're going to start going into frequencies that are not used exclusively for aircraft, then you're going to need some FCC license. So far I do like C. How about D? When operating on frequencies above 30 megahertz, not assigned for international use. That was the last one, and I think that was a none. Yeah, we needed none for that. Let me go back real quick. Yeah, not assigned for international use, that was a none. So of this list, the only one that you do need, the MROP, appears to be C. And it is. That's a little bit of splitting hairs there. No marine operated is aircraft and helicopter pilots using radios for fish spotting, using frequencies not allocated exclusively to aeronautical mobile services, must obtain the element 1 when operating below 30 megahertz. Fish spotting. I think they had to come up with when would a pilot actually use a frequency other than aeronautical? And somebody said, how about if they're looking for fish? So there's our example. All right, there's a global distress type system that we'll talk about a little bit in the next element, but you're going to see GMDSS pop up a little bit. That's the Global Maritime Distress and Safety System. It's a worldwide system for automated emergency signal communication for ships at sea that was developed by the UN. There's an organization under the UN, the IMO, and that was part of a SOLAS convention. It's a set of safety procedures, types of equipment, and communication protocols used for safety and rescue operations of distressed ships, boats, and aircraft. So the key word is going to be that it's automated. It's an automated emergency signal. So you don't necessarily have to pick up the microphone and talk into it. It's mostly pressing some buttons. The only reason we bring it up, I think there's one question that might ask about the licensing requirements, but you can see there's 3 GMDSS licenses that you can actually get. It looks like it's an element 7 and element 7R if it's restricted, and those are the radio operator licenses for the GMDSS system. And that's going to be it's a passenger ship, and the requirement is that at least two persons holding an appropriate GMDSS radio operator license. So that's going to be either the 7 or the 7R. Or if the passenger ship operates exclusively within 20 nautical miles of shore, so you're operating close to shore, at least two persons holding either the GMDSS radio operator license or the restricted. I'm not sure if that's any different. I don't see the difference, so I would probably just take off the second part once I actually look at it. There's also a GMDSS radio maintainer's license, or that's the Element 9, but they're not really referring to that in the regulation here. I don't want to go into that too much. Well, we do have a key topic on GMDSS at a later date. But the question for licensing requirements: what are the radio operator requirements of a passenger ship equipped with a GMDSS installation? And yeah, excuse me, I've still got a touch of my head cold that's still holding on, so I notice I'm still a little stuffy. All right, so we're talking about a passenger ship that's equipped with GMDSS. A, the operator must hold a GROL 3 or higher, element 3 or higher. B, the operator must hold a restricted radio telephone operator permit. They keep throwing that in as one of the options. So far, we haven't had to answer that correctly, and I don't recall that ever being one of the correct answers, at least for element 1. C, the operator must hold an MROP, MP, or higher license, element 1. That's GMDSS, so they're going to require a little bit more than that. And here it looks like our right answer is on D. Two operators on board must hold a GMDSS radio operator license or the restricted radio operator license, depending on the ship's operating areas. Which I do like that one. So, all right, so I guess the difference is beyond 20 nautical miles, both of the radio operators must hold the full, not the restricted, GMDSS radio operator license. Relaunch it right away. Okay, let's go to the next one. Oops, that's it. All right, so that's element 1, key topic 2.